Hard things have always appeared bigger than they truly are, not because they are insurmountable, but because the mind paints them that way. The illusion of difficulty is created in the brain long before the actual task is touched. Think about it. Before you even begin, your mind whispers stories of exhaustion, failure, and pain. It convinces you that what lies ahead is too heavy, too complex, too demanding. Yet the truth is, this resistance is nothing more than perception. It is not the task itself that is unbearable. It is the mental weight placed on it that makes it feel impossible. The brain exaggerates discomfort to keep you safe, but safety is rarely the birthplace of greatness. When you step back and look closely, you realize that difficulty is not a wall designed to stop you. It is a mirror that reflects your hesitation, your fears, and your doubts. The brain disguises these inner battles as external obstacles. It convinces you that the problem lies in the size of the challenge, when in reality, the problem lies in the size of your belief. Every hard thing you face is neutral. It has no power of its own until your mind labels it as unbearable. This is why some people thrive under pressure, while others collapse under the same weight. The difference is not in the task, but in the story their brain has been trained to tell. The illusion becomes stronger the more you feed it. If every time you meet resistance you retreat, the brain learns to amplify the fear. It concludes that avoidance is the answer and builds a habit of surrender. Over time, the smallest obstacles begin to feel like mountains, but when you push forward despite the discomfort, something remarkable happens. The brain begins to weaken the illusion. The monster it created starts shrinking. What once looked impossible now feels manageable, even ordinary. This is why the first step is always the hardest, not because the action itself is complex, but because the brain is screaming at you to stop. It magnifies the pain before it even arrives, projecting images of failure, exhaustion, and defeat. And yet, once you begin, you realize most of that pain never even existed. It was smoke, not fire. The brain tricked you into believing the task was heavier than it truly was. The moment you act, the illusion cracks. You discover that the wall you feared was only a shadow. Understanding this illusion is the beginning of power. When you see difficulty for what it is, a creation of the mind, you stop being controlled by it. You start questioning the voice that says, "This is too much." You begin asking, is it really too much, or is my brain protecting me from growth? In that moment, the task in front of you loses its grip. It no longer defines your limit. It simply becomes a doorway. Every hard thing you've ever avoided was not as impossible as it seemed. What made it unbearable was the hesitation, the overthinking, and the fear your brain wrapped around it. Strip that away, and the task becomes just another step forward. This is the trick that separates those who rise from those who remain stuck. The ones who rise are not stronger by nature. They simply refuse to bow to the illusion. They see through the lie, they confront the resistance, and in doing so, they train their brain to stop exaggerating the pain. The illusion of difficulty will always exist, but it loses power once you recognize it for what it is. The brain is clever, but you are stronger. Every time you expose its tricks, every time you walk through the fear it creates, you weaken its control. You realize that hard things were never meant to break you. They were meant to reveal you. The struggle is not an obstacle. It is an invitation to step into a stronger version of yourself. And the first victory always begins with the courage to see past the illusion your brain has created. The brain is not fixed in its ways. It is a machine built to adapt. Every thought, every action, every repeated choice leaves behind a trail, a pathway that becomes easier to walk each time you travel it. This is why habits feel automatic. They are grooves carved into the mind through repetition. The tragedy for most people is that they unknowingly program their brain for weakness instead of strength. They repeat avoidance, they repeat procrastination, they repeat the pursuit of comfort until the brain begins to crave it. Soon, resistance to hard work feels natural, almost uncontrollable, not because they are weak, but because their brain has been trained to seek the easy way out. What they don't realize is that the same brain can be trained in the opposite direction, toward resilience, effort, and challenge. It is not a matter of ability, it is a matter of programming. Reprogramming the mind begins with small, deliberate choices. Each time you choose action over avoidance, you rewrite the code of your brain. The neurons that once fired for comfort and laziness weaken, while the ones that fire for discipline and progress strengthen. Science calls this neuroplasticity, but in practice it feels like transformation. What once felt impossible becomes easier, not because the task has changed, but because your brain has shifted its preference. Over time, the brain learns to find reward in what it used to fear. The resistance fades, and the very activities that once felt unbearable begin to feel natural, even necessary. The most important truth is that the brain does not care what you teach it. It only cares that you repeat it. If you repeat weakness, it will learn weakness. If you repeat strength, it will learn strength. It is neutral, waiting for your command. This is why the secret to greatness is not a single moment of inspiration, but the relentless training of the mind to follow a different pattern. Every day, you either strengthen your excuses or strengthen your discipline. Every choice programs your future self. The one who understands this no longer waits for motivation to appear. They create it brick by training their brain to respond differently to difficulty. Repetition is the master key. The first time you force yourself into discipline, it feels painful. The second time, it feels slightly less so. The third time, your brain already begins to predict the outcome, and with enough practice, what once felt like torture feels like instinct. You stop asking yourself whether you feel like it because your brain no longer resists. It has been trained. This is how people transform from ordinary to extraordinary, not by being born with special gifts, but by reprogramming the brain to find joy in what others avoid. Once you realize this power, the excuse of weakness disappears. You are not limited by who you are today. You are only limited by how willing you are to retrain your mind for who you want to become. The brain is wired to chase reward, but it does not naturally understand what reward should mean. From birth, it is conditioned to seek pleasure and avoid pain, to choose what feels good in the moment instead of what builds strength in the future. This is why so many people stay trapped in comfort. They have unconsciously taught their brain to celebrate ease. Rest feels like victory, escape feels like safety, and indulgence feels like success. Even though all of these things slowly erode potential, the mind becomes addicted to shortcuts, and soon anything that requires effort feels unbearable. But the truth is that pleasure is not fixed. What you call rewarding is not written in stone. It is trained, shaped, and molded by your repeated choices. You can rewire the system. You can shift the definition of reward from comfort to challenge, from laziness to effort, from weakness to growth. Every time you push yourself through struggle and then take a moment to acknowledge the progress, you teach your brain that hard work is satisfying. At first, it resists, clinging to the old patterns, whispering that you should return to what is easy. But if you refuse, if you celebrate effort instead of retreat, the brain begins to associate accomplishment with pleasure. Slowly, the wires cross. The surge of satisfaction no longer comes from avoiding pain. It comes from conquering it. And the moment that shift happens, hard work no longer feels like punishment. It feels like fuel. The very thing you once ran from becomes the thing you crave because your brain has been retrained to see growth as the real reward. The danger lies in not controlling this process. If you do not consciously decide what your brain should celebrate, it will decide for you. It will cling to the quick fixes and temporary pleasures, and before you know it, you'll find yourself chasing things that drain you instead of build you. That is how people waste years on distractions, not because they lack ambition, but because they attach their reward system to the wrong behaviors. This is why discipline must be deliberate. You must choose what to celebrate. You must choose what to label as success. If you attach reward to struggle, your brain will reward you for growing stronger. If you attach reward to comfort, your brain will trap you in weakness. The power lies in reinforcement. Every time you finish a difficult task, you must anchor the moment. Take it in, breathe it in, tell yourself this is what victory feels like. The more you do this, the more your brain begins to anticipate the joy of completion instead of the pain of beginning. Soon, the struggle itself becomes exciting. The effort itself becomes fulfilling. You stop chasing comfort because it feels empty compared to the sweetness of growth. And in that moment, the entire game of life changes. You no longer run from the hard path. You desire it because your brain has learned the ultimate truth. The real reward has always been hidden inside the struggle. Pain is often misunderstood. Most people see it as a signal to stop, a barrier that means they have reached their limit. The truth is, pain is not a punishment, it is a compass. It points directly to the places where growth is possible. The discomfort you feel when you push yourself beyond your comfort zone is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that your mind and body are being stretched into new capacity. Without pain, there is no transformation, because nothing changes when everything feels easy. The brain is designed to protect you, so it sends out alarms the moment you leave the safety of what is familiar. But those alarms do not mean danger. They mean opportunity. They are proof that you are standing at the edge of your old self and about to step into something greater. The problem is that most people interpret pain the wrong way. They believe it means stop, retreat, turn back. They avoid it at all costs, seeking a life of comfort, but comfort breeds stagnation. The absence of pain is also the absence of growth. By running from pain, they unknowingly run from progress. What they fail to see is that every breakthrough in life comes dressed in discomfort. The hardest workouts produce the strongest bodies. The toughest challenges create the sharpest minds. The deepest struggles forge the most unshakable character. Pain is not your enemy. It is the price of admission to a greater life. Once you realize this, your relationship with it changes forever. Leaning into pain builds resilience. Each time you face it, instead of fleeing, the brain learns a new lesson, that the signals of discomfort are not threats, but gateways. You become stronger, not just physically, but mentally. Fear begins to lose its grip because you no longer associate pain with defeat. You start to see it as a guide, a teacher, a mentor. Every ache, every struggle, every sacrifice becomes a message. You are becoming more than you were yesterday. This shift in perspective is the foundation of persistence. When others quit at the first sign of struggle, you endure because you understand that pain is proof you are on the right path. In fact, the sweetest victories in life are inseparable from pain. Think of any great achievement, the hours of unseen practice, the countless failures, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices no one applauded. All of it hurt, but all of it mattered. Without pain, the reward would not carry weight. Without struggle, success would feel empty. This is why embracing pain does not weaken you. It liberates you. It teaches you that the path to everything you desire runs straight through discomfort. And instead of avoiding it, you begin to welcome it. Pain becomes a compass, pointing not to where you should stop, but to where you should go. And the more you follow it, the more you realize that the life you dream of has always been hidden behind the very struggles you once feared. The human brain craves victory. It is wired to light up when progress is made, even in the smallest of ways. The problem is that most people only chase giant victories. They want the big breakthrough, the massive success, the life-changing result. But those kinds of wins are rare, and the distance between them is filled with struggle. When the brain is only trained to recognize big wins, it starves during the process and loses motivation. This is why so many quit. They believe progress isn't happening because they cannot see it in monumental form. The truth is that transformation is built not from colossal victories, but from micro wins stacked daily. The small steps forward, repeated consistently, build the momentum that makes the big leaps possible. When you set out to tackle something overwhelming, the sheer size of the challenge can paralyze you. The brain looks at the mountain and convinces you it is too high to climb. But when you break the mountain down into small hills, each step forward becomes manageable. Completing one small task creates a spark. That spark becomes energy. That energy becomes momentum. And momentum is the most powerful force in human psychology. Once you feel it, you no longer need willpower to continue. The brain begins to associate hard work with progress because it is rewarded with little victories along the way. These micro wins are not meaningless. They are the building blocks of confidence. Every time you celebrate a small achievement, you are programming the brain to crave the process. You are teaching it to connect satisfaction with effort. Think of how powerful this becomes. Instead of only feeling good when the entire goal is complete, you feel good every step of the way. Train yourself to find joy in the climb, not just the summit. This rewiring makes hard things not only tolerable, but enjoyable. You no longer resist the grind because the grind itself provides reward. You no longer need to wait months or years for a payoff. You are paid in progress every single day. This is why small wins matter so much. They create evidence that you are moving forward. They prove to your brain that effort is never wasted. They silence the voice of doubt because you can point to concrete proof of progress. Over time, the accumulation of these wins builds an unshakable foundation. Confidence grows, resilience grows, faith in yourself grows. What once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable, not because the task has become easier, but because you have trained your brain to celebrate every step. The secret is not in waiting for the final victory, but in learning to fuel yourself with micro wins along the way. With each one, the brain learns that success is not a distant destination, but a daily practice. And that practice turns hard work into something you no longer avoid, but something you hunger for. Most people waste years of their lives waiting for motivation. They believe they need to feel inspired before they can take action. They sit still, hoping for some spark, some perfect wave of energy that will carry them forward. But that spark rarely comes. Days pass, opportunities vanish, dreams remain untouched, all because they misunderstood how motivation works. The truth is that motivation does not arrive before action. It is created after action. The very thing people are waiting for is not the cause of progress, it is the result of it. When you move, motivation follows. When you act, the brain rewards you with energy, clarity, and drive. But if you wait, nothing changes, and you remain trapped in the same cycle of delay. Think about how the brain works. It is designed to conserve energy. It resists unnecessary movement until you force it into motion. That is why the hardest part of any task is the beginning. The first step feels heavy, the resistance feels unbearable, and excuses scream the loudest in your mind. But once you push through that barrier and take action, the resistance weakens, momentum takes over, and suddenly the work feels lighter. What felt impossible minutes ago now feels manageable, even natural. This is proof that motivation is not something you wait for. It is something you generate. And once you learn this, you free yourself from the biggest lie the world has ever told about success. The myth of motivation has destroyed countless dreams. People believe they are lazy, when in reality they are simply waiting for the wrong thing. They believe others are born with more drive, when the truth is that others just understand the law of action. Those who succeed are not more motivated, they are more disciplined. They do not wait to feel ready, they begin before they are ready. They understand that the brain does not hand out motivation as a gift, it hands it out as a reward. The very act of movement creates the fuel needed to keep going. The cycle is simple. Action creates motivation, and motivation creates more action. The breakthrough comes when you stop asking yourself, do I feel like it? And instead tell yourself, I will act first. The moment you train yourself to do this, the myth of motivation loses its grip. You no longer sit around waiting for a spark that never comes. You become your own spark. You realize that energy comes from discipline, not desire. And the more you practice this, the more unstoppable you become. Hard things stop looking like impossible battles because you no longer wait for the right feeling. You simply begin. And in beginning, you create the very motivation you once thought you lacked. This is how ordinary people transform into extraordinary ones, not by waiting for motivation, but by destroying the myth of it forever. Repetition is the silent architect of transformation. The first time you attempt something difficult, it feels unnatural. Your brain resists with everything it has, whispering that this is not for you, that it is too hard, too heavy, too much. But the truth is, the discomfort of the first attempt is only the friction of novelty. The brain has not yet created a path for this behavior. It is unfamiliar, and what is unfamiliar feels threatening. The secret is to push through this beginning stage long enough for repetition to take over. With each attempt, the brain carves a deeper groove, a clearer path, until what was once unbearable begins to feel familiar. This is how habits are born, not through inspiration, but through consistent repetition that reshapes the very structure of the mind. The human brain thrives on patterns. Once it recognizes a sequence, it automates it to save energy. At first, lifting a heavy weight, waking up early, writing for hours, or studying intensely feels exhausting. But as you repeat the behavior, the brain adapts. It builds efficiency. It strengthens neural pathways, making the act smoother, faster, and less draining. What required enormous willpower at the start eventually requires little to none. The effort does not vanish. It becomes ingrained. This is why repetition is the ultimate weapon. It turns discipline into instinct. It turns struggle into rhythm. It makes what once seemed extraordinary feel ordinary. This process works both ways. Just as repetition can train strength, it can also train weakness. The brain does not judge between good or bad habits. It only obeys what is repeated. If you repeatedly escape discomfort, the brain automates avoidance. If you repeatedly procrastinate, the brain automates delay. If you repeatedly choose ease, the brain automates weakness. This is why so many people feel trapped. They have rehearsed their own chains. But the chains can be broken the same way they were built, through repetition. By deliberately practicing discipline, you overwrite the old patterns. You erase the programming that once held you back and replace it with a new system that thrives on consistency and effort. The magic of repetition is that it makes success predictable. You no longer rely on fleeting bursts of motivation or inspiration. You no longer gamble with your future. You create certainty by training your brain to act automatically in alignment with your goals. Imagine reaching a point where persistence is not a fight, but your natural state, where doing the hard thing does not feel like an uphill battle, but like breathing. That is the reward repetition offers. It is not glamorous, it is not immediate, but it is inevitable. The more you practice, the more unshakable you become. And soon, the tasks that once intimidated, you become the very foundation of your power. This is how repetition transforms not just your habits, but your entire life. The greatest transformation begins when effort stops being something you occasionally do and starts becoming who you are. Most people treat hard work as a task, something external they must force themselves into. They say, I need to be disciplined today, or I should try to push harder, as if effort is an accessory they put on and take off whenever it suits them. But the secret is this: the mind becomes unstoppable when effort is no longer a choice, but an identity. When discipline is not what you do, but who you are. At that point, the brain stops resisting because it is not negotiating between two selves, the one who wants comfort and the one who wants progress. There is only one self, the one who thrives on effort. Identity shapes behavior more powerfully than willpower ever could. A person who merely tries to act disciplined will always struggle because the brain still sees discipline as unnatural. But when a person declares, this is who I am someone who does hard things, I am someone who keeps moving forward no matter what, the entire operating system shifts. The brain aligns itself with identity because it craves consistency between who you believe you are and what you do. If you see yourself as someone who avoids pain, you will always avoid it. But if you see yourself as someone who embraces challenge, then every act of effort becomes an expression of your true self. This is why identity is more powerful than motivation. It rewires the very foundation of behavior. Linking identity to effort requires repetition and affirmation. Every time you do something hard, you are not just completing a task, you are casting a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Each small act of discipline reinforces the identity of a disciplined individual. Over time, those votes add up until you no longer need to convince yourself. You no longer need to fight against your old patterns. The new identity takes root, and the brain works to protect it. This is the point where effort feels natural, because your identity demands it. The mind resists acting against who you believe you are, so once you claim the identity of discipline, laziness feels unnatural, not the other way around. This shift changes everything. Hard work is no longer a punishment. It is a reflection of your character. Struggle no longer feels like suffering. It feels like proof that you are living in alignment with who you truly are. The battle against procrastination, fear, and doubt weakens because you no longer argue with yourself. You simply act in accordance with your identity, and the more you act, the stronger that identity becomes. This is how ordinary people become extraordinary, not by forcing themselves into occasional effort, but by merging their identity with discipline. When the brain believes this is who I am, resistance dies, and you become unstoppable. Fear has paralyzed more dreams than failure ever could. It whispers in the mind, magnifying what could go wrong, exaggerating the pain, convincing you that retreat is safer than progress. Most people surrender to this voice, believing fear is a signal to stop. But fear is not the enemy. It is energy. It is the raw fuel of transformation, waiting to be redirected. The same surge of adrenaline that freezes you in place can be the exact force that pushes you forward. The difference lies in perspective. If you see fear as a cage, it locks you inside. If you see it as fuel, it ignites your power. Every great leap in life is accompanied by fear. Trembling in your chest, that rush in your stomach, that uneasiness in your thoughts, it is not a sign of weakness, but proof that you are standing at the edge of growth. Fear shows up when you are about to cross into the unknown, and the unknown is where breakthroughs are born. The mind wants safety, but safety is the death of progress. Fear is your compass, pointing directly toward the path that will expand you. The very thing you are afraid of is often the thing you must do, because that is where your growth hides. Avoiding it keeps you small, but embracing it transforms you. The key is not to eliminate fear, but to act alongside it. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it. Each time you do, the brain learns a powerful lesson, that fear is not fatal, it is survivable, and more than that, it is productive. What once felt like a wall begins to feel like a doorway. And with each repetition, the power of fear changes shape. It no longer chains you down, it drives you. The same energy that once paralyzed you now sharpens your focus, strengthens your resolve, and fuels your persistence. Fear becomes an ally instead of an enemy. When you harness fear, you become unstoppable. You stop waiting for the day when you feel fearless, because that day never comes. Instead, you rise with fear in your chest and move anyway. You use its energy to fuel your intensity, its urgency to sharpen your decisions, and its presence to remind you that you are alive and evolving. Fear then transforms into proof that you are on the right path. If you feel it, it means you are stretching beyond who you were yesterday. And if you keep stepping into it, the very force that once held you back becomes the fire that propels you forward. That is the secret of turning fear into fuel, to stop running from it and start feeding off it. Discipline is not about one heroic act of willpower. It is about the consistent, repeated choices you make when no one is watching. The brain learns not in single events, but in patterns. Every time you show up, every time you push through resistance, every time you do what you said you would do, you carve a groove into your mind. That groove becomes stronger with each repetition until the action that once felt impossible becomes natural. This is the law of compounding discipline. Small acts repeated daily do not stay small. They build into habits. Habits shape identity, and identity determines destiny. Most people overestimate what they can achieve in a day and underestimate what they can achieve in a year of consistent effort. The brain resists in the beginning because it is wired to protect energy. Starting a new habit feels heavy, But this resistance is temporary. Once the brain adapts, the effort decreases, and the new behavior becomes automatic. This is why persistence matters more than intensity. It is not about how much you do in one day, it is about what you return to day after day. Like compound interest, discipline grows quietly, invisibly, until one day the results appear, and everyone calls it sudden success. But it was never sudden. It was the accumulation of thousands of disciplined choices stacked on top of each other. Think of discipline as a muscle. If you train it once and stop, it weakens. If you train it consistently, even with small weights, it grows stronger. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes effortless because the brain and body adapt to the new standard. The mistake people make is searching for motivation instead of discipline. Motivation is emotional, it rises and falls. Discipline is structural, it holds steady no matter how you feel. When you rely only on motivation, you start and stop endlessly. When you rely on discipline, you move forward regardless of mood. This is the compounding effect. Discipline carried out long enough turns into identity, and identity makes success inevitable. The greatest transformation happens not in explosive moments, but in the quiet repetition of daily choices. The law of compounding discipline is the most reliable force in human achievement. It does not care about talent, luck, or circumstance. It rewards only those who stay the course. Every decision you make is a vote for the person you are becoming. And when you consistently cast those votes in the same direction, the momentum becomes unstoppable. You no longer need to fight yourself because discipline has reprogrammed your brain to work for you instead of against you. This is how ordinary people become extraordinary, through the silent, consistent compounding of discipline until greatness is no longer a dream, but a natural outcome. The subconscious mind is the silent architect of your life. It governs your habits, your automatic responses, and the beliefs that shape your reality. While the conscious mind makes decisions, it is the subconscious that carries them out, often without resistance or hesitation. This is why so many people feel stuck. They consciously want success, discipline, and progress, but subconsciously they are programmed for comfort, fear, and limitation. The key to breaking free is not to fight the subconscious, but to reprogram it, to train it to align with your highest goals instead of your lowest fears. Repetition is the language of the subconscious. What you repeatedly think, feel, and do becomes the script it follows. If you constantly tell yourself that something is hard, the subconscious makes it harder. If you tell yourself you are weak, it provides evidence to prove you right. But if you consistently feed it with thoughts of strength, resilience, and possibility, it shifts. Slowly, the old limiting scripts begin to dissolve, and new empowering patterns take their place. This is why affirmations, visualization, and intentional habits are so powerful. They bypass the conscious resistance and plant seeds deep within the subconscious soil. And once those seeds grow, they guide behavior automatically. The subconscious does not distinguish between truth and repetition. If you repeat a lie long enough, it accepts it as reality. If you repeat an empowering belief long enough, it accepts that too. The brain is always being trained, whether by fear or by courage. This is why you must take responsibility for what you allow into your mind. Every word you speak, every thought you entertain, every belief you reinforce becomes part of the subconscious program that drives your future. Most people let the world program their mind through negativity, distraction, and limitation without realizing it. But the ones who rise take control. They deliberately train their subconscious to support their vision until it becomes impossible to think, act, or live beneath that standard. Once the subconscious is aligned with your goals, discipline no longer feels like struggle. It feels like instinct. What once required effort becomes automatic. Waking early, pushing through discomfort, choosing growth over ease. These become your natural responses, not forced behaviors. This is the hidden power of training the subconscious. You no longer fight against yourself because every layer of your mind is moving in the same direction. Success becomes less about force and more about flow. The mind, once your greatest obstacle, becomes your most powerful ally. And when that shift happens, nothing in the external world can stop you because the foundation within you has already been rebuilt. The way you see yourself sets the boundaries of what you can achieve. Self-image is the hidden thermostat of your life. No matter how high you turn up your effort, if your self-image is set low, you will always sabotage yourself back to what you believe you deserve. This is why so many people chase success but never sustain it. They take action, they fight through resistance, they even see progress, but deep down, they still see themselves as unworthy, weak, or incapable. And the subconscious mind always pulls reality back to match the image it holds. To break free, you must raise the standard of who you believe you are. When you see yourself as strong, disciplined, and unstoppable, your actions begin to mirror that image. Your brain aligns with the identity you choose, and life starts to bend in that direction. The subconscious does not respond to wishful thinking. It responds to consistent identity. If you tell yourself you are disciplined, but your daily actions say otherwise, the subconscious remains unconvinced. But if you repeatedly act in alignment with the identity you want to build, the subconscious eventually accepts it as truth. Every choice you make is not just an action, it is a statement about who you believe yourself to be. When you push through a workout, you are not just exercising, you are reinforcing the belief that you are strong. When you refuse to quit, you are not just persisting, you are rewriting the story that says you give up easily. Over time, these choices sculpt a new self-image, one that supports your highest potential instead of limiting it. This is why transformation is never just about results. It is about identity. Results can be temporary, but identity is permanent. If you want lasting success, you must see yourself as the kind of person who naturally creates it. This is why visualization is so powerful. When you vividly imagine yourself as disciplined, successful, and unshakable, the subconscious begins to accept it as real. The brain cannot fully distinguish between imagined experience and lived experience. By repeatedly seeing yourself in the position you desire, you train your mind to make it your new normal. The self-image rises, and your actions rise to match it. The gap between who you are and who you want to be closes, not because of external change first, but because of internal alignment. The truth is, the world treats you the way you treat yourself. If you see yourself as small, you will act small, and the world will confirm it. If you see yourself as powerful, you will carry yourself with strength, and the world will respond accordingly. The greatest battles are not fought in the external world, but in the invisible arena of self-perception. Once you master that, once you build a self-image that is unbreakable, success is no longer a question of if, but when, because you will never allow yourself to live beneath the image you hold of yourself. Becoming unstoppable is not about eliminating obstacles. It is about developing the inner strength to move through them, no matter how many appear. Life will never stop testing you. There will always be resistance, setbacks, and uncertainty, but the one who becomes unstoppable is the one who decides again and again that nothing will make them turn back. This kind of power does not come from talent, luck, or perfect conditions. It comes from building a mind that cannot be broken, a mind that has trained itself to see challenges as fuel, fear as guidance, and discipline as freedom. Once this shift happens, obstacles no longer feel like barriers. They become stepping stones. And with each stone you climb, your strength multiplies. The unstoppable person is not the one who never feels tired, afraid, or doubtful. They feel all of these things, but they move forward anyway. They have built habits that carry them even when their emotions resist. They have trained their subconscious to align with their highest vision, so quitting no longer feels like an option. They have raised their self-image to the point where mediocrity is unbearable. This combination creates a force that cannot be stopped, not because the world suddenly becomes easy, but because their inner world has become unshakable. The external struggles shrink in comparison to the power they feel within. Momentum becomes their greatest weapon. Each act of discipline reinforces their identity. Each victory, no matter how small, compounds into belief. And each moment of persistence builds a track record that the brain cannot deny. Over time, the mind stops arguing against progress because the evidence is overwhelming. Success no longer feels like something distant. It feels inevitable. This is the true meaning of being unstoppable. You no longer depend on conditions or moods. You move forward because it has become who you are. You have trained your brain to see growth as natural, and once that happens, there is no going back. The world cannot hold back someone who has mastered their own mind. No external barrier can outlast inner conviction. No setback can defeat someone who uses it as fuel. No failure can stop someone who sees it as feedback. When you reach this point, life changes. The goals that once felt impossible begin to fall into place, not because the path is smooth, but because you have become strong enough to walk any path. That is the destiny of the one who trains their brain, transforms their self-image, and compounds discipline until it becomes identity. They become unstoppable, not because the world bends to them, but because they have bent their mind into the shape of greatness. And once you carry that within you, nothing outside of you can stand in your way.